Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this community meeting for this special use permit request. My name is Lori Schweller. I'm an attorney with Williams Mullen representing the applicant, Verizon Wireless. And with me also is Nate Holland, who is the project manager for this site. I have a presentation for you, which I will give to describe the proposal. And then Chris Perez, who is the county's senior planner working on this project, will give some information regarding the special use permit process and upcoming public hearings. And then we'll turn it over to the public, and the clerk, Carolyn Schaffer, will call on individual members of the public to make your comments and for us to answer your questions. So I will get started. And
I would like to let everybody know that we have turned off the chat feature. So if you put something in the chat feature, I'm the only person that can see it. And we'll have 2 minutes to speak when we get to public comments.
Can everyone see my screen at this point?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. The proposed site is located just east of Greenwood Station Road, immediately south of I-64, and this is an area west of Crozet. This map is the Albemarle County GIS map showing you the tax map parcel, which is a small parcel, only a little over 1 acre. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the applicant's reason for proposing this wireless facility. The bottom line is the applicant needs more capacity for data transmission, for voice, data, and home internet. So this facility would provide all of the services that Verizon Wireless provides. As you probably know, especially these days, wireless is an essential utility. At the time of this Statista study on the right-hand side of your screen, almost 60% of Americans no longer had a landline telephone. So we rely on wireless for our communications more and more. Over 75% of 911 calls are made by wireless devices. So good wireless service is essential for safety. And of course, more and more we're using the internet for school, work, access to government, and health-oriented applications, among others. Increases in data usage have gone up tremendously, 38-fold in the past 8 years and 3.5 times in just the past 5 years. And of course, since the beginning of COVID, that increase has only accelerated. Some studies that were done comparing average home consumption during the first quarter of 2019 to the first quarter of 2020 found that home consumption of data increased 47% over that time. And data consumption on smartphones in March 2020 was up 75% over March 2019. Also, Virginia Commonwealth Connect report has a goal for functionally universal broadband coverage in the Commonwealth within 10 years. Right now, 64% of Virginia's rural population lacks access to broadband, as that's defined in that report. This map is showing you a small microcosm of the Verizon Wireless network. The proposed site is where the star is located, and the closest existing sites are numbered 1, 2, and 3. As you can see from the bottom of the screen, these sites are approximately 2 to 3 miles away. And so an additional site is needed in the middle in order to serve the residents located in this area, the businesses, and motorists along the major thoroughfares. So with these monopoles that are very short, as we provide in Albemarle County, the distance of propagation of the signal is only 1.5 to 3 miles typically, depending on obstructions such as trees and buildings. So you can see that we're right in the center of an area where there are existing wireless facilities, but a new one is needed in the middle precisely because of that increase in data consumption and use of wireless that I described. We did look at co-locating on power towers. That question was asked from a couple of residents. I'm showing you here those closest Dominion power towers. The one on the right-hand side of your screen is far too close to an existing site that I showed you on the previous map. And that line of power towers moves steadily away from the area we need to cover and gets too close to downtown Crozet. So that co-location wouldn't work. Those are also not the type of structures on which Dominion permits co-location, but just wanted to show you that location. So I'll talk a little bit about the site layout and design. Here's the overall site plan. You can see Route I-64 to the north there. And then the proposed site is this little square here, a very small lease area, 40 by 40 feet. And there's an existing gravel drive here on the Scruby property, and we would have an access road leading up to the site. It's 36 feet and 10 inches from the monopole to Greenwood Station Road, and it's a little over 38 feet from the lease area to the right-of-way for the interstate. This is a little bit easier to see. You can see the lease area in the box and the access area, 20 by 20 foot, 20 foot access and utility easement. In Albemarle County, wireless facilities adhere to a tiered system, tier 1 being facilities that are antennas attached to existing structures and within buildings. So tier 2 is what we call treetop facilities. So a reference tree is identified, which is the tallest tree within 25 feet of the proposed monopole. And the monopole can be no taller than 10 feet taller than that reference tree. We have, Verizon Wireless has decided to adhere to all tier 2 standards for this site, even though it's technically a tier 3 site, meaning a special use permit is required because of avoidance areas, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. So this slide is showing you the reference tree. The arrow is pointing to the reference tree. This is the tree by which the height of the monopole is measured. And then all of these other trees have been measured, both caliper and height, and they're listed on the tree inventory. The main reason for that is no trees within the lease area or within 100 feet of the lease area may be removed unless identified for removal. So the county maintains control over tree removal. This is a schematic elevation showing you the monopole, which would have a maximum height of 94 feet with a 2-foot lightning rod in comparison to the reference tree. And the monopole and the antennas and all of the other attachments on the pole would all be painted a matte brown color to blend in with the trees. At the base of the site, you can see there would be a 10-foot board-on-board fence, which would completely screen ground equipment from view from neighboring roadways. There would be no lights whatsoever on this facility. The antennas are flush-mounted antennas. As you can see from this cross-section, the maximum distance from the monopole to the face of the antenna, to the back of the antenna is 18 inches. This is looking at the side here on the left-hand side. So it appears to be a very straight and slender profile. I'll show you now the results from the balloon test that we conducted on January 11th, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And this is a map of the locations where these photographs were taken. And all of the photographs were provided by Chris Perez and county staff, and NBNC Engineering produced photo simulations to show you exactly what the site would look like from these various locations. The key to this map is these red dots show you places where the balloon, which is about 4 feet in diameter, red balloon, was visible, and the blue, this one, for example, shows you locations where the balloon was not visible. So first we'll start near the site. We're approaching the site from the south on Greenwood Station Road, and you can see the balloon in the trees. That's exactly what a Tier 2 treetop facility tends to look like. In the summer months, you won't see it at all because of the leaves in the trees. So depending on where you are in the topography, you might see the balloon in these photographs, or you might not. You'll see a reference here in the upper corner of where we're looking for each view. This is a photo simulation of that same view. From now on, I won't show you the balloon. I'll just show you the photo simulation. So this is what the monopole will look like from Greenwood Station Road when the leaves are off the trees. And this is a closer up view. We're right at the entrance of Septenary Winery. And again, when the leaves are on the trees, you probably won't see it at all. And this is what it looks like in the winter months. Here we are on the other side of 64. There's an orange arrow pointing to the balloon, which is buried in the trees. And here we are also on the north side of the facility, another photo simulation from Greenwood Station Road. When you're on I-64, you can catch a fleeting glimpse. This is I-64 westbound, but again, it's sort of buried in the trees. Here we are at Septenary Vineyards. We are in the vineyard itself, and this is a zoomed photograph based on the note from the county, and this is a photo simulation. Now we're standing at the main house at Seven Oaks, which is where Septenary Winery is. This is, again, what you want to see with a Tier 2 treetop facility. If you check the Albemarle County Wireless Policy Manual, you will see that this is the kind of view that we're trying to provide, where you have a mountain backdrop so that brown paint blends into the background. And this is the view from the Septenary Tasting Room, same sort of view with a mountain backdrop. Shifting over to Mirador, which is on the west side of Greenwood Station Road. This is a view, again, this is zoomed because we're pretty far out from the entrance to Mirador Estate on Greenwood Road. This is the view at the house itself, and the balloon was not visible from Mirador. In this view, we could make out the balloon. There's an orange arrow in the distance right at the horizon from the house. These next few views are from Mirador Estate as well, and this is looking from the barn area southwest of the site. And then here we are near the relocated tavern, so it's closer, and this is, again, southwest of the site. Same here. And this is from actually inside the tavern. And you know, these are zoomed photographs. And then finally, this is the view from Route 250. It's not visible for most of the way along Route 250, but this one location, it is visible because the parcel is not adjacent to 250 and is not within 500 feet. 250 is not considered an entrance corridor for the purposes of this application, but I-64 is. So let's talk about avoidance areas a little bit. I've listed here some of the avoidance areas that kick a Tier 2 into a Tier 3 review. And one of those is parcels within historic districts. These areas in green on the map to your right are National Register historic districts, and we are within one of those. And so that's why this proposal is being reviewed as a tier 3. And again, I-64 is an entrance corridor, so the Architectural Review Board will review the visibility of the ground equipment and monopole for visibility from I-64. Also, the parcel is adjacent to the Yellow Mountain Agricultural Forestal District, so that committee will review the proposal to ensure that it poses no threat to agriculture in the district. This map is showing conservation easements in the area, and there are quite a few. There are 8 Virginia Outdoors Foundations and Albemarle County easements in the area. I'm pointing to the parcel and with the arrow. The county analyzes wireless facilities based upon the zoning ordinance excerpt that I've put on this slide. Virginia Outdoors Foundation does not evaluate these facilities because it's ensuring that the parcel that has the conservation easement is complying with the easement, not what parcels around it do. So the analysis is done by county staff, and the question for staff is if the facility is located on land subject to a conservation easement or adjacent to a conservation easement, then they're evaluating visibility from resources specifically identified for protection in the easement. It will only be visible from 2 properties that are subject to conservation easement: Seven Oaks Farm, which is where Septenary Winery is located, and Mirador. And we and county staff contacted the Virginia Outdoors Foundation, and VOF provided the county with a memorandum identifying the resources to be protected under those easements. And I want to be clear that that analysis for the county is separate and apart from the analysis that's done in compliance with federal and state review. And that's something that Verizon's third-party consultant does in conjunction with the Department of Historic Resources. That review is done under the National Historic Preservation Act, and the applicant's environmental consultant has provided all of the photo simulations that I just showed you to the Department of Historic Resources so they can review and determine whether the facility would have an adverse effect on properties registered or eligible for registration on the National Register of Historic Places. And both Mirador and Seven Oaks are on the National Register of Historic Places. This afternoon, the Historic Preservation Planner, just as a side note, did provide information regarding the project to the county's Historic Review Board. So that's my basic presentation. I have more information for you that I'll present in order to answer your questions. But let me turn it over now to Chris so he can provide information regarding the county process.
All right. This is a special use permit, which requires 2 public hearings. It's going to the Planning Commission on Tuesday, March 2nd. That meeting will be virtual, and notices will be put out to all abutting owners, as well as I'll send out a list in the listserv that I've been using, as well as it'll be notified in the paper for 2 consecutive weeks. The board meeting is tentatively scheduled for Wednesday, April 7th. That'll also be virtual, and I'll be doing the same thing with the listserv I created, and it'll also be notified in the newspaper for 2 consecutive weeks. Prior to both of those public hearings, there will be an ARB meeting, which is going on February 1st, as well as an Agricultural Forestal District Committee meeting, which will also be on the 1st. If you would like to attend those meetings, let me know. Those are strictly for recommendations and comments that those bodies will be providing me during the analysis. The Planning Commission, that Tuesday, March 2nd, they will be providing a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, and the board will be taking an action on April 7th. And those meeting dates are tentatively scheduled and subject to change per the applicant's request, but the notices will be going out. If you have any questions about the project or the process, give me a call. My phone number is 434-296-5832, extension 3443, or email me at cperez@albemarle.org or SP2020-12@albemarle.org. I would like those comments no later than February 2nd. All right, Lori, do you want to open it up for comments, questions?
Yes. Carolyn, can you organize that for us?
Sure. At this time, if you'd like to speak on this matter, ask a question or comment, please use the raise hand feature. And if you're calling in, it's *9, and you'll be put in the queue automatically as you raise your hand. Please be patient. Everybody gets 2 minutes. You cannot share your time, which would mean that I'll give up my 2 minutes so someone else can have 4 minutes. Everybody gets 2 minutes. And you can only speak one time. All right, this time we have Tim Scruby. Tim, you have 2 minutes to speak. Please state your name and address, and if you are representing a group, what that group is, and your time starts now.
This is Tim Scruby, and I live at 8153 Dick Woods Road, Afton, Virginia. My wife and I own the property. I think it was view number 9 that was shown. It's across the interstate and across the road from the proposed site. And I would just like to express that we strongly feel that there is a need for this facility in the area. We believe that Verizon is choosing one of the better, if not the best, locations for the tower, and we'd like to express our support and hope that we'll get it. We've struggled for years in my location here at P Ridge on Dick Woods Road with poor rural internet service. I work from home, and it's a constant struggle to be able to get reliable internet service. And there's still no end in sight to that. Thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Next, we have Joe Curry. Joe, please state your name and address. You're representing a group, the name of that group, and your 2 minutes starts now.
My name is Joe Curry, 7483 Greenwood Station Road, and I'm probably a half mile away from the facility, and I have a couple concerns. Being so close to the road is primarily my largest concern. I don't disagree that we need a better infrastructure, but I wonder if this would be considered an attractive nuisance and possibly be something for targeting for maybe some, I don't want to call them delinquents, but for some curious adolescents. Also, how is the site identified? What other sites were considered? And the gentleman previously mentioned Dick Woods Road. I don't think we were told the impact on the improved cellular service or internet service, how far that would spread out. And this location being in a quiet community, although you're doing your best to keep it undercover, it's still something that we have to drive by every time. You know, it may not see it from the property, but we see it every day leaving our property, coming and going to our home. So I can't imagine that this location is ideal, except for to Verizon, where it's easiest for them to get to versus a probably more private solution that may cost a little bit more money. And that's all I really have to say.
So I'd like to respond to some of those questions. Thank you, Mr. Curry. Verizon Wireless has scores of sites across the county. You probably don't notice them, but they're all up and down the roadways and on properties. You might notice them more now that you're aware of what they look like. And they're very hard to pick out. All of these sites have fencing around them so that they're not accessible to the public, so people can't climb up the pole. They're protected with security, and that's required by the county ordinance. The service, depending on obstructions such as trees and topography, mountains getting in the way, from sites like this will go, 1.5 to 3 miles. It would certainly reach your home half a mile away. The closest sites are 1.8 miles and about 3.5 miles away. And so we're trying to connect to those to provide seamless service and to add capacity for the service that they are giving now. So Verizon Wireless needed a site in the middle of those existing sites, which I showed on that map earlier, to enhance the, we know that better service is needed in the Greenwood area. Western Albemarle needs improvements in wireless and improvements in internet. And this would provide that for Verizon Wireless customers. So the site is selected. It starts first with the radio frequency engineers at Verizon Wireless, determine where a new site is needed based on complaints from the public and what they're seeing in terms of users and overcapacity on their modeling, computer modeling. And so they determine where a site is needed on a map and actually designate a search ring. And those rings are getting smaller and smaller. When we first started doing this, 15, 20 years ago, those rings could be a mile in diameter because the technology at the time could travel 7 to 10 miles. That's not true for technology today. As I mentioned, it's going a short distance based on the wavelength of 4G. And so we need to have them closer together, not only because of the technology, but because of the enormous increase in number of users on a site. There's not unlimited capacity that a cell tower can serve. And so once the RF engineer has found that location, in this case, it's a very small search area ring, then one of Verizon's site acquisition managers will go out to the site and look for good locations based on access and topography, steep slopes, tree cover. There's so many things to be considered when approaching a site for both zoning considerations, whether a landlord is interested in leasing to Verizon Wireless. And so all of those things have to be considered. Several candidates are selected and presented to the radio frequency engineer, who selects one, and then we go into the leasing process. So that's the basic process there. This particular site, as I mentioned, the parcel is very small and very narrow. And as you move to the east or to the west, the topography drops considerably. If you're on I-64 driving by the site, you'll notice you can see the full length of the tree when you're right at the site. But if you're immediately to the east, you only see the top half of the tree. That's how much the topography drops off, about 30 feet. So it's really the best location to provide service to the areas needed in this area.
All right. The next speaker is Todd Zimmerman. Please state your name, address, if you're representing a group, the name of the group, and your 2 minutes starts now.
Thank you. My name is Todd Zimmerman. 200 Seven Oaks Farm is my address. And my wife and I are the owners of Seven Oaks Farm, which you've heard mentioned several times on this presentation. We're also the owners of Septenary Winery, and we're residents on the Seven Oaks Farm property, which is directly adjacent to the proposed cell tower. Our property is listed on the National Registry of Historic Places. It's a Virginia landmark. We're in a conservation easement and apparently also in an avoidance area. So we're opposing the tower because we don't think there's been sufficient consideration of less impactful sites. I'm sure based upon the maps that I've seen that there are better sites just a short distance down the road that may be a little more expensive for Verizon, but it sure seems like they'd be less impactful to the history of the area, still allow the visitors of our business to enjoy the good scenery, less impactful to the history of Mirador Farms. And so my questions are, A, would we consider these sites just a short distance down the road, even if a tower had to be built a little higher to get the technological impact? B, if not, why not? And C, can the county require some kind of consideration of alternative sites given the incredible impact we're going to have on these historic properties in the area? Finally, can we confirm that we won't move forward until the full review by DHR and the Forestry Commission and all that? Thank you. That's it for my questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Zimmerman. I'll answer those questions. The materials were provided to the environmental consultant today. We just got the photo simulations that I showed this morning. And so we are going to be working with them to find out what exactly that timeline is. We fully expect to have response from DHR before the Planning Commission, but we're looking to find out an actual ETA on that. And that's very important because their response determines what Verizon will do. If they ask for some sort of mitigation, Verizon always takes that into consideration. So we're just not there yet. We don't know what their response will be, and we will certainly give that proper attention. This particular location we think is well sited. It's not to say we wouldn't consider other locations if this one doesn't work out, but we want to work on it because we've been working on it for several years now, and we hope that it turns out to be a good site. But that's the process we're in now, to explain the project and to get feedback.
All right, our next one is Rebecca Deeds. Rebecca, please state your name, address, if you're with a group, who you're representing, and your 2 minutes starts now.
Yes, so hi, I'm Rebecca Deeds. I live at 138 Junction Lane, which is in Charlottesville, but I'm here as part of a group called Preservation Piedmont. And I am here to listen and gather information. And one of the Mr. Zimmerman asked one of the questions that I had in my mind, wondering about the possibility of just, moving the tower into a deeper part of the site that might require, a higher height and might cost Verizon more money, but if that was even a possibility. And I also wanted to know if you could get into the specifics of how this would increase accessibility to Wi-Fi for community members living in this area that will be impacted. If you have specific data, percentages, figures for this area in particular versus generally. Thanks.
Thanks, Ms. Deeds. I don't have data from Verizon Wireless regarding customers or service. That's non-information I have or could share. But it's certainly well known for those of us who live in Western Albemarle that better service is needed. That there's no question about it. And one of the fastest and most efficient ways to get better internet service to rural areas is through wireless, because unlike laying fiber or other types of infrastructure, it only requires beefing up the wireless infrastructure that's already there. And so those who live in the area, they would immediately have better service on, of course, mobile devices, but for their home computers, they can get a hotspot or use their mobile device as a hotspot and use it for wireless, for internet at home. And that's critical because we know that during COVID and all other times, and I've lived in the county many years, students who are trying to work from home have a really difficult time in Western Albemarle and have to drive to the high school or drive to one of the other schools in Western Albemarle to get a signal. And so this would help those who are on the Verizon Wireless network to do that. In answer to your first question, whether Verizon would consider moving the site, yes, it certainly would consider moving the site if it comes to that, but we need to evaluate this site here. Enormous amount of due diligence has been done. It's the right location for the network, and we just want to make sure before we abandon something that we think is good for the community that it won't work out. So we're not giving up. We're just working on this particular project right now and explaining all the details that we can and vetting it as best we can. So we're really looking for comment back from DHR so that we can, get some first response there.
All right, next we have Nancy Schlichting. Please state your name, your address, and if you're representing a group, the name of the group, and your time starts now.
Hi, my name is Nancy Schlichting. I actually live in Buckingham County, but I represent the owner of Mirador Farm that is directly adjacent to this proposed tower. I want to make a couple of points. One is that there was a reference to the tower and balloon not being visible from Mirador. That is actually a reference only to the main house itself, where there is some tree cover. But virtually all the other photos from Mirador reflect that the cell phone tower would be visible not only from the barns, which are part of the historic register, but also Sandblack Tavern, which is directly across from where the cell phone tower would be located, and from many other points on the farm, as well as Greenwood Station Road, Greenwood Road, and Route 250. I also would like to point out that although there's a reference to 2 cell phone towers that they believe need support by this proposed project, there are 3 other towers in the area. In the application, there's a reference to 4, but in fact, in addition to the Parsons Green tower, there's also one at Afton, which is the Kreitzer Shop Road. So there are in fact 5 towers in the nearby area. And then I do have a couple of questions. One is, do the simulated photos include the trees which are slated to be removed? The application does include 9 trees to be removed. Secondly, what is the definition of a mature tree? Because my understanding of these trees and what I've seen of those trees is that their diameters do not reflect that they are in fact mature trees that would remain on the site. And then also the current landowner of the property for the proposed site actually owns the parcel directly east of this particular parcel. And I want to know if there's been any conversations with him about potentially moving the cell phone tower back east into the other parcel that he owns, which would be less visible to all of these properties, including the roads, and to a couple of other comments that have been made. Even if the tower had to be taller, it would be less visible to all these points. And finally, there was a reference to the topography being 30 feet different from the current proposed site. And I want to know if that means that you have actually looked at that additional acreage to see if the cell phone tower could be pushed back east onto that particular parcel.
Your time is up.
Thanks, Nancy. So the tree inventory, which lists about 40 trees, I guess, it does have a few that need to be removed because they are in the way of the proposed access. The trees that are to be removed are actually between the existing gravel road and the 40 by 40 foot lease area. So they wouldn't affect views from the east, the west, or the north. And actually these are, you know, some of them are one of them's dead, but they vary in size from 6 inches in diameter to the largest one is 24 inches in diameter, the closest one to the lease area itself. So they won't have a significant impact on the tree coverage in the area. It's just a heavily wooded area, and all the trees on the parcel, throughout the parcel, will remain other than those few. It's important to note that most of the buffer is being provided by trees that are on the Seven Oaks property and not on the Scruby property. And trees can't be removed from the Seven Oaks property under the terms of their conservation easement. So you can count on that screening remaining. I showed on my map the 3 closest handoff towers. We do talk about one more that's on Kritzer Shop Road, farther to the west in our application. So that is 4 in the general vicinity, Verizon Wireless, but that one's even farther away than the 3 that I mentioned. So this would be in the center of the 3 that I showed on that map. In terms of topography, we quickly looked because there had been some inquiry both from the Zimmermans and from you about shifting the site to the east on the Scruby property. So we were curious to know what that topography is. That has not been fully analyzed at all. We can just look at online maps to see roughly from the GIS maps what that change in topography is, so that we understand, you know, it matches up with what we're thinking, which is about a 30-foot drop. All of that had been looked at in 2017 when the site was initially scouted out. I'm not sure that did I miss a question? I think that's it. Thank you.
Next, we have Tim Keller. Tim, please state your name and address. If you're representing a group, please state the name of that group, and your 2 minutes starts now. Tim, you need to unmute. Tim, can you unmute? Tim, I'm going to move you back into the queue since for some reason you can't get unmuted, and we'll try this again. I am going to move Brenda Plants. Brenda, please state your name and address, who you are, if you're representing a group, who that group is, and your 2 minutes starts now.
Thank you. I'm Brenda Plants. We own the property at Greenwood Road, Milburn Farm, which is adjacent to Mirador and on to the next to Septenary. And I'd like to point out one of your slides said it only impacts 2 properties. They're the 2 major historic properties in Greenwood, Mirador and Seven Oaks. So I don't understand why that doesn't take precedence. The next thing I'd like for Verizon to state exactly what will this give us. It's giving us cell phone capabilities, but what we really need in the neighborhood is broadband access. Hotspots really don't do a great amount of work for someone who needs to work from home, who needs to do schoolwork. And I don't believe that this Verizon cell tower is going to do much for providing internet service in the homes in Greenwood. But if Lori and Verizon can address that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Plants. Yes, this facility, if you have Verizon wireless service and you have a hotspot or you use your phone as a hotspot, would provide internet service in your home for your computer. And you would be able to work, pursue education, attend meetings like this using this facility. And that's the purpose, is to expand not only voice and data, but also internet capabilities for those on the Verizon wireless network.
All right, I'm going to try Tim Keller again. Tim, can you please state your name? Make sure you can unmute. Let's try Tim a different way. Tim, can you please unmute and turn on your video so we can see you? Nope, he disappeared on me. Okay. Let me go to John Rainey. John, you have, please state your name and address. If you're representing a group or a company, please state that. You have 2 minutes to speak and your time starts now.
Okay, my name is John Rainey. I'm at 6991 Batesville Road, Afton, in Albemarle County. I don't represent any group except for those that have common sense. My basic question is, could the Scroobies not cut every tree on this property and put in a hog farm?
Okay, I guess that's all he had to say.
If Mr. Rainey's finished talking, I will answer the question. There happened to be a hog farm immediately on the opposite side of 250 from Mirador pretty recently, but all agricultural uses are permitted in the RA area. Just to answer the question, yes.
Next, I have Barbara. Please state your name and address. If you're representing a group, please state that. Your 2 minutes starts now. Barbara, can you please unmute yourself? Barbara, can you unmute?
Am I unmuted?
Okay, you got it.
Okay, sorry. Barbara Frazier, 8639 Dick Woods Road. And we are currently using a Verizon hotspot that works pretty well, except for weekends. We're about a mile from Blue Mountain Brewery. And when they have a huge crowd up there, you can forget trying to get on. We also have a winery that's going in across the road from us, which is going to bring more huge crowds into this area. And we desperately need more cell service in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frazier. You brought up a good point, which is that, as I mentioned before, the more demand you have on the network, the more of these facilities you need to provide additional capacity. And because of the enormous number of breweries and wineries and other businesses in the area that bring a lot of traffic, especially on the weekends, people who live in the area need additional data capacity. Thank you.
Next, I have Beth Curry. Beth, please state your name and address. If you're representing a group or organization, please let us know, and your 2 minutes starts now.
Hey, I'm Beth Curry. I live at 7483 Greenwood Station Road. I live down the street from Septenary. And while I hear everybody's conversation about needing Wi-Fi and needing that, I don't have that issue in our home. So I obviously feel fortunate at this point hearing some of you guys talk. But I do stand on the side of questioning this whole process with the tower and where it could go. Because at the end of the day, Verizon makes sense. You're going to save money. You don't want to schlep. You don't want to make it uncomfortable for yourselves. And meanwhile, to the other lady's point, you've picked a spot in a beautiful community next to our 2 historical properties on a drive-in that we'll face every day. So I'm not a fan. I'm sure you're going to do due diligence, but when this thing started, some young man on the phone said he was going to make another announcement in a newspaper about these meetings. And I'd like to know, is there another way of communication about the situation outside of, you know, a newspaper, which in this generation's chisel and stone?
Chris, I'll turn that to you.
Right. So I do have a listserv going on that has around 200 people on it that's contacted me during the course of this project. So I will be sending out the notices through that as well. But county ordinances and state code require all abutting owners to be notified through mail. We'll be doing that. And then the newspaper also 2 weeks prior to and consecutive. Are you on my listserv? If you're not, I'd like to add you, and I'll make sure you get that notice as well.
At this time, I don't have anybody else with their hand raised to speak. Mr. Keller sent me an email saying he did not want to speak. Okay, wait, I have one. Whoop. Okay, hold on. I have Joe Curry. Did he speak earlier?
Yes, Joe was our second participant.
Okay. I'm going to promote Rory.
No, I don't have him.
Okay, Rory, please
Hey, y'all.
state your name, address.
Rory Stolzenberg. I live in the city. I don't have any questions. I just want to say you guys are doing the Lord's work by getting data connectivity out to people who need it. So great job. And, you know, if you're taking orders, it seems like maybe Tim Keller could use one of these over his way. Thanks. Have a great night.
Thank you. All right, I have.
Hey, Carolyn, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I understand that we only have a certain amount of time tonight, but I wondered, I mean, in the format of a typical community meeting, you know, we would have people be able to hear what Lori has to say and ask more questions, but also we would be given like a smaller amount of time, and we're being given more time tonight possibly. But I just wonder, it's not a public hearing, so I mean, I don't know, I don't want to question the method of only 2 minutes, but you know, and I do agree we have to say at some point that we're done. But if somebody wanted to ask another question, I personally don't have a problem with that, especially if we don't have like 10 or 15 more people signed up. But that's up to you guys. That's just my opinion. Is we're here to have people from the community ask questions and hear what Lori has to say or Chris has to say. So if there's a member of the community who asked a question and now has another question, I would be okay to hear that, but other people can say how they feel about that. That's
Lori's
all I had to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I appreciate those comments, Jenny.
Okay.
We had a community meeting that had over 100 people on it, and we had to formulate rules based on what we experienced there. Since we didn't have that turnout tonight, I think, you know, we could certainly have more back and forth than we originally planned.
Well, I'm going to allow Joe Curry to speak again. Mr. Curry, you have 2 minutes. Your time starts now. Go ahead and state your name and address again, please.
Joe Curry, 7483 Greenwood Station Road, Greenwood, Virginia, 22943. And Christopher, I don't think, and I don't recall, you may have sent out a notice by mail to us. I don't recall neither my wife who spoke earlier or me getting anything. So if you can make sure that we are notified through mail, that would be great.
Are you guys property owners or are you renting?
Property owners.
Okay, because I mailed everything to the property owner. So I'll check.
I'm not saying you didn't. I would like to be notified in the future. And Lori, thank you for answering the questions. But my follow-up question was to the woman from Dickwood's Road earlier near Blue Mountain Brewery. Won't your new proposed cell tower there really help her more than this cell tower? And follow-up to that was, I wonder, well, let's just leave it at that. I don't want to take up any more time.
Thanks, Mr. Curry. We've been talking about, when we talk about the existing facilities in the Verizon wireless network, we're talking about actually existing towers. And so Verizon does have one on Kritzer Shop Road right now. And so we're talking about needing new, more capacity for Verizon wireless customers, even with those sites that already exist. So when you get farther away from those sites, like Ms. Frazier might be in this area where we're trying to improve service, and then you have greater demand on that site that's on Kritzer Shop Road, you're not going to be able to use that site farther away because all of the capacity will be absorbed by the customers at Blue Mountain Brewery who are closer to it.
Okay, next I have Sarah Zimmerman. Sarah, please state your name, address, and if you are representing a group or organization, your 2 minutes starts now.
Hi, thank you. My name is Sarah Zimmerman and I live at 200 Seven Oaks Farm. And I am I'm Todd's wife. So we own Seven Oaks Farm and Septenary Winery. And my questions to you, number one, this is a historic property. Greenwood has a very historic history. And I just can't understand why, given this, why we wouldn't consider using an alternate site for this tower before you proceed with this one, given the impact that it's going to have on the area. I have another question for you too. I'm wondering about the future when 5G comes. Isn't this technology going to be outdated? And then what's going to become of this tower if it's erected?
Thanks, Sarah. The reason that we're proposing this particular location on the Scruby property is it's the best site to provide the best coverage. It really is the site that will provide the best coverage to those living in the residences nearby, the Greenwood Station Antique Store, the Greenwood store on 250, all the motorists up and down 250 and I-64. It's really the best site for that, and this is where we would like to put it if we can. We certainly recognize that this is a very historic area, no doubt about it. We understand that. We understand that completely. We actually have the same question in a different form for every single site we do. We're asked, well, why do you want to put sites near residences, or why do you want to put sites near this beautiful thing or that beautiful thing? And there's always something that we need to mitigate our facility to avoid adversely impacting. We do understand that, and that's why the county has these regulations to provide that the height may not exceed 10 feet above a reference tree. It's painted brown. The antennas are flush mounted. These are very special wireless facilities that we install in Albemarle County to comply with the county's policy and zoning ordinance. Otherwise, you don't have service for people who need it, who happen to live in a historic area. Lots and lots of people live in this area, not just the estate owners, and they need service. And they've been suffering with poor service for as long as I can remember. We've been trying to get sites approved in Western Albemarle. So we're trying to do that for these people who need the service. That's the answer to the question, why this location. There's infrastructure all around you. There are telephone poles and electric poles stretching across the Mirador estate if you look out your window now. So we just, we get used to these small brown poles all around us that provide essential utilities. And right now it's not landline telephone that people need more, it's wireless. And that's not just communications, but also internet for meetings like this. Your second question about 5G, technology is changing constantly. And what we're proposing here is current state of the art in our area, which is 4G. That changes constantly. I'm sure you've been reading about the carriers buying additional wavelengths, and everybody, all the carriers are trying to get mid-band 5G. Verizon currently uses a very short wavelength 5G, which is only usable in the urban areas, and you have the poles very close together like telephone poles with very small antennas. It's always changing. And if 5G comes to Albemarle County and it's a mid-band like 4G, we would simply replace or add antennas to the existing sites, just like we did when 4G came around back in 2011, 2012. We went around the county and added antennas or changed antennas to lots and lots of existing poles. And so that's what happens. The pole does not become obsolete. The pole will still be needed. 5G will fill in the gaps for, again, additional capacity.
All right, next we have Nancy Nancy, go ahead and state your name and address again.
That's fine. I'm sorry, I would have saved you sooner if I could have gotten unmuted. It's Nancy Schlichting on behalf of Mirador. So one point I want to make is that the suggestion that it's only the owners of these two particular properties that will be impacted by this cell phone tower is patently false. Everyone who visits this area, the historic area, I mean, it's been designated as a historic area for a reason. It's for everyone who drives through there. It's for the people on 250. It's for the other owners in the area. So this isn't just the two larger properties that are impacted. It's all of them. The reason you need a special use permit is because there's a reason the county is preserving certain rule and historical character of this particular area. And so the idea that Verizon can't find a way to push this cell phone tower to some alternative site in a very close area and possibly be even owned by the same landowner is ludicrous. My question, Lori, and I know that I fired so many at you, the question that didn't get answered was whether the photo simulations that have been provided to the DHR includes the trees that are going to be taken down, or are they somehow, so I'm just asking. So the photo simulations, I'm assuming, still contain the 9 trees that are slated to be removed. That's one question. And then the second question is, does Verizon, do you all keep statistics? Are you aware of losing of additional trees after these concrete pads and cell phone towers are installed, and whether it's normal, as I would imagine it would be, that you would lose additional trees after the installation of a cell phone tower? So those are the two questions.
Sure. Thanks, Nancy, for clarifying that for me. The photo simulations present the current situation. So if they're showing their actual photographs and the monopole is superimposed in that photograph. So if a tree is to be cut down in the future, it's probably still showing in that photo simulation. They're not removed for the photo simulation, to answer that first question. The second question is, trees have to be protected when you do construction in the county. For any construction, you have to employ measures to protect the trees that you're not cutting down. And so no, the answer to the second question is no, we don't lose trees because of constructing the facility.
All right, next we have Carrie, and I'm not going to even try your last name. So if you please state your name and address. If you're representing a group or an organization, please state that, and your time starts now.
Hi, my name is Lou Chiarella. I'm here on my wife Carrie's phone. We live at 326 Bluebird Lane on the far side of Seven Oaks Farm, and I do not represent any specific group. What I've heard here tonight on the part of Verizon is that what they want is what's best for everyone, what's best for Verizon, what's best for coverage, what's best for a historic community. But at the same time, I've heard very little about any type of detailed analysis for any location other than the one proposed. I have not heard any type of detailed analysis for any of the alternate sites. And while there has been discussion of Verizon's willingness to consider alternate sites as part of its planning process, that doesn't appear to be reflected by what information that I've previously received or what I've heard here tonight. It's all been about one specific location and the pursuit of only one specific location. If there is a true willingness to find what's best for the community and best for coverage and best for a historic district, it would seem then that it would make sense to consider as fully other sites and to present that information and the cost benefit analysis that was done associated with these other locations, as opposed to essentially a fait accompli, this is the site we want, and our willingness to consider alternate sites seems really superficial, if at all. So I really want to know to what extent Verizon has fully considered alternate locations as opposed to the proposed one.
Thanks, Mr. Chiarella. In a zoning action, as Chris and your planning commissioners and supervisors on the line will attest, we propose an application and the planning commissioners and the supervisors can only consider the application before them. We are farther down the line than that point in time where various properties might have been reviewed. In fact, that point in time was years in the past, and enormous amounts of due diligence have been done since that time with respect to federal and state law, under NEPA, environmental law, tribal lands, archaeological resources, all of the things that have to be evaluated. A lease has been entered into with a landlord. It's just a very long process, and we are in that point of the process where we bring to the county community development department and planning commission and board of supervisors a project. So it's not a time when we present multiple options and ask the county to choose one. The county's not interested in designing our site or choosing our location. We have to make those choices ourselves as the applicants and present the project, and they're considering the project that we've presented. It's just not feasible to go to the same level of work for a number of different sites, bring it to the public and say, hey, which one do you like? So that's the reason why we're not discussing any alternate locations. There are no alternate locations. This is the only application that we've submitted or that the county can consider.
All right, next we have Todd Zimmerman. Please state your name and address, and you have 2 minutes to speak, starting now.
Thanks. Todd Zimmerman, 207 Oaks Farm. And I raised my hand before Mr. Chiarella spoke, who said things much more eloquently than I probably would. But let me just make a statement here. So we're hearing a lot of broad brush comments about how internet may be impacted, how the cell tower may benefit this or that. The only thing I've heard for certain is we've seen pictures that show 100% impact upon the historic area. I asked in a letter in 2018 to consider alternative sites. So you may have had diligence that you did before then, but the simple fact of the matter is we asked in 2018 to consider alternative sites, not don't do a tower, but an alternative site, a short way down Mr. Scruby's property, which would have been less impactful to the historic area. So Lori, will you or will you not consider my request from 2018 to look at alternative sites and stop impacting the history and scenery of the area? Simple question. Thanks.
First part of my answer is that I started working on this site in May of last year, I believe. So I'm not aware, I wasn't aware of the letter you refer to, Todd. But that's why I haven't responded to that letter. And again, with respect to this application, yes, we certainly will consider alternative sites if we need to. There are things that that we can look at, you know, theoretically, just theoretically, if you needed to raise the height of the tower 30 or 40 feet and obtain fall zone easements in a narrow part of the property. And, there are things that theoretically could be done, but that's not what, that's not where we are right now. We're trying to evaluate this particular application. So the answer to your question is yes, if necessary.
Next, we have Tim Scruby again. Tim, your time, state your name and address. Your time starts now.
Hello, my name is Alice Scruby. I'm speaking on Tim's computer. I live at 8153 Dickwoods Road, Afton. My husband and I own the historic property directly across the road from the proposed site. Our family has owned this land for over 100 years continuously, and thus the proposed farm that the site is going to be is a century farm. We care very deeply about Greenwood and its historic nature. My mother-in-law was very responsible for the Greenwood Afton Rural Historic District coming about. And we care very, very deeply about this. If you came to my property or the proposed site, I believe the first thing you would notice is the interstate that sliced through our family's farm in the 1960s to provide for the interstate, cutting the farm in two. So think about how you get your cows under the interstate, since that sliced the farm in two. It was a tremendous impact on the farm and something we will have to live with forever at the farm, because it was for the greater good, for people liking to drive up and down the interstate every day. And now we all like to talk on our cell phones and get on the internet every day. And these services are greatly needed. And I believe that a brown monopole 10 feet taller than the tree line is an acceptable mark on the landscape. We have utility lines all through Greenwood, and we have an interstate highway right through Greenwood. And I feel like this is an acceptable form of progress and a provision of necessary utility. Thank you.
Next, we have Joe Curry again. Joe, your 2 minutes
Yes,
starts
yes,
now.
thank you, thank you. And Ms. Schweller, thank you so much for fielding my questions. You mentioned that this is a desperate area, and the reason this area was selected because of the need to the folks of Greenwood and this surrounding neighborhood. And I think I'm quoting you correct when you said that. So we are half a mile from the site, so we would either have good service or bad service because of this site. And I have to tell you, we don't have any issues at all with our cell phone service. So when you say there's a need, there's a need, there's a need, and being so close to the center that you're talking about, we should experience the greatest need. And you could come by and use my phone anytime you want, because I never have a poor service. I never drop calls. Our internet works fine. So I don't know if there's really a need or what. And another part that concerns me is when we move it from 4G to 5G and you change those antennas, what do we go through this whole process again? Because then there's going to be 6G. And once we say yes to this area, and I respect that it's a historic proposal, we're trying to maintain the historic landmarks, do we just not open up the floodgates for additional antennas being added on and just, well, there's a tower already, might as well just add to the one that's there? And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Curry. It often happens, in fact, more often than not, when we have a zoning process that certain people in the neighborhood say that their service is good. That happens all the time. And then others will say their service is bad and they may live very close by. We rely on the radio frequency engineers who evaluate this and field the calls from customers to tell us that. It could be also that service is in the process of degrading because it's not robust enough for the area. So some people are getting service from other towers that are close by, and some people are not getting service. They're not being reached by those towers. So I'm not an RF engineer and I can't say anything more than that, but I do trust our engineers to decide where sites are needed because they're very expensive to develop and build. They wouldn't put up these facilities, which are one wireless provider facilities. They don't get rent from other wireless providers like some of the tall cell towers you've seen. They wouldn't put them up if they didn't need them. They're very expensive. And so they're intended to provide better service for the customers. I'm glad you have good service now. It could be that in the future, you're going to need more. And it's certainly true that your neighbors need it now because we've heard from lots and lots of them who need service now. Regarding antennas in the future, the county has processes that allow a wireless service provider to replace or add equipment to an existing monopole. So those processes may be administrative. They may require some hearings and review. It depends on what the changes are. So it's hard to say since we don't know what the future will hold in terms of what that technology will look like. Also, I should say that the county is very sensitive to the visual impact of these facilities and typically will provide a long list of conditions associated with a special use permit that the application must adhere to throughout the life of the project. And so those conditions may include, for example, that the standoff of an antenna would not exceed a certain distance. So, those are things that your representatives are carefully watching. Chris Perez will include those types of things in his staff report, which will preclude something unexpected going there in the future.
Next, we have Sally Thomas. Sally, please state your name and address. And if you're representing a group or organization, your time starts now.
Hello, I'm Sally Thomas. I live at Crestwood place, which is not within the concern area here, but I'm a veteran of a lot of battles about cell towers in the long past. So my question is simply based on that history. A lot of towers were put in the rural areas actually in order to provide coverage on interstates. And I just want to make sure that the residents are not being led to believe that there's some extra coverage they will get when in fact it will mostly be of benefit to the travelers on the interstate. So is there some engineering study that can set that concern to rest? Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Thomas. Absolutely not. Those are not, these facilities we're putting up today are intended to serve the residents and businesses in the area, as well as those who are driving through. These, you may be thinking about 20 years ago when oftentimes carriers would put a very tall tower on the top of a mountain. And, you know, with 1G and 2G, those signals could go for 5 to 10 miles. Now we're reaching the point where we have to have shorter towers in between those mountaintop towers to provide that the data services to people who are living in the residential areas between them, in the valleys, throughout our rural areas. This is one of those sites. It's additional capacity. You've already got coverage in the area for the roadways, but you need more capacity for people in their homes and businesses and driving by as well to use internet and wireless devices.
All right, next we have Cindy Lackman. Cindy, please state your name, address, and if you're representing a group or organization, 2 minutes starts now.
David Tallman, it's 280 Newtown Road. I'm with Cindy here using her laptop. So the questions that we have, first being, if it's allowed to go through and they put a tower here, and this question's for Chris and Lori, what would be the process if they wanted a second tower? Would it have to go back again for a special use permit, or would it be automatically allowed? Second question would be, I keep thinking about increased capacity. I would assume with that statement that to increase capacity, you need to add another tower. There's a, I'm not sure if it's got approved yet or not, but there's a proposed tower going in at Parsons Green. There's already one tower there and looking at a second tower. What's the chances that could happen here as well? Thank you.
Mr. Lockman, you may be thinking of multiple towers from different wireless providers. Since the county's policy is to ensure that towers are as short as possible, 10 feet above the reference tree, they're only sufficient to hold the antennas for one provider. So occasionally you will see a property that has multiple towers. There's a site like that on I-64 on Afton Mountain as you drive westbound. It's on the right-hand side, and there are 4 there. Every major carrier has one there. There's one on 250 driving eastbound from Crozet to Charlottesville that's got 2 on your right-hand side, and we'll have a third. That's why you might see more than one. You can't add another one unless you go through this exact same process. It's a brand new facility and would require the same, the same process. If it's in an avoidance area, it would require a special use permit. I hope that answers the question that you were asking me. An additional capacity, it wouldn't be the same carrier adding another tower. The carrier would simply replace its antennas if it needed to somehow change the service it was providing from that particular facility. So Verizon Wireless would not be adding a second monopole to this same property. I can't envision a situation where that would ever happen.
All right. Next we have Rory Stolzenberg. Rory, please state your name and address if you're representing a group or organization, and your 2 minutes starts now.
Hey, thanks. It's Rory Stolzenberg again from the city. Sorry, I forgot to mention, I did have a question earlier about how the historic district applies to this project. My understanding was that National Historic Register districts were sort of ceremonial, but it sounds like this has triggered some specific reviews from DHR. I recognize that several people have mentioned the view from a historic slave plantation. You mentioned utility poles, and someone else mentioned, the view from cars driving through the district, and those don't seem very antebellum period appropriate. What is it about cell towers that triggers this review, if it is specifically cell towers, and what sorts of other changes to the view shed would trigger this review? Thank you.
Thank you, Rory. I'm not aware of any other development that triggers this review. It's specifically cell towers. So there are a number of reviews that cell towers trip. One has to do with federal and state law. So we talked about the National Historic Preservation Act. And under that, one of the things that someone needs to do if they're developing a cell tower is to work with the local historic preservation office, which in this case is the Department of Historic Resources in Richmond, so that they can evaluate the proposal and they can let you know whether they think there's going to be any direct impact or adverse visual impact. And in this case, we're talking about adverse visual impact because there's no allegation that there are any archaeological resources and so on. So the state basically handles that aspect of compliance with federal law, and that is done through environmental consulting agencies that the carriers hire to handle that. So a third-party consultant handles that process, and then we get a review from DHR. So that's one component of dealing with that, and that only pertains to properties that are on the National Historic Register or those that are eligible for the National Historic Register, not to any other historic properties. I think that basically answers your question. Similarly, the wireless zoning ordinance is extremely complex in Albemarle County to ensure that wireless facilities are not adversely impacting various resources. And one of the requirements in the zoning ordinance is that, as I mentioned before, if a facility is proposed to be located on property that's subject to a conservation easement or adjacent to property subject to a conservation easement, then as part of the county review, visibility from resources identified for protection in the easement are evaluated. And the important thing to understand about that is conservation easements are meant to provide benefits to the public in exchange for tax benefits that the owner receives. For example, the restrictions that you might put on a property that is under conservation easement would be that you could not cut trees, or you could not build structures or subdivide, those types of things. They don't necessarily provide that you couldn't tear down structures, because what they're concerned about is the public's view of these preserved properties from the roadways, the enjoyment of these historic, of these view sheds, and the protection of things like waterways. So it's an entirely different analysis there. Because just because someone puts a conservation easement on their property doesn't mean they can control the properties around them. The county's just looking to make sure that that there are no properties that are listed in the conservation easement for protection that are affected by the proposal.
All right, we have Mr. Lackman again. If you please unmute yourself. Your 2 minutes starts now.
Okay, this is David Tomlin. My computer crashed. I could not get logged in from the site that was on the county, so I'm with a friend logged in. This is a follow-up to the second tower. The question being, if this,
Whoops.
the second tower would be my unmute keeps coming up, whether it comes from Sprint or T-Mobile or somebody else, just like what's going on currently at Parsons Green. There's two there, and there's a third one going in there. So what's in place, Chris, from the county to prevent this, if there is any procedures in place to keep a second or a third? Lori, is there anything in the works or in the plans to have Sprint come in with the tower as well, or T-Mobile or somebody else?
Certainly not from our perspective, Mr. Tomlin. This is only for a Verizon Wireless facility. I'll let Chris address the rest of your question.
Right. So like Lori said earlier, if somebody was going to come in for another application to put another tower in, they would have to go through the same process that they're going through. If it's this historic district, like if we're talking about the same site, it would have to go through the exact same process. We do have a section in our ordinance which speaks to, I'll read it right here, the facility shall not be located so that 3 or more existing or approved personal wireless service facilities would be within an area comprised of a circle centered anywhere on the ground of a radius of 200 feet. So there's a provision in the ordinance that speaks to a limit of 3 within a 200-foot radius. I will say, I think that only applies to a tier 2. Being this was a tier 3, that would not apply. But the board could take that into consideration during the review.
At this time, I don't have anybody else with their hand raised.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending and for all the great questions. I think, Chris, you've provided your contact information, and you all have my contact information on the letters that I've sent. So please feel free to reach out if you have further questions or comments.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you to staff for getting us all together.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.